Hi, Dr. Myers. This is Teresa Mesquita, and this is my interpersonal communication project. If you move on to slide 2, slide 1 was just the introduction, but if you move on to slide 2, it's labeled introduction, and it's just showing you what is going to go through what I'm going to talk about in my whole project. And I'm talking about the definition and introduction of my overarching goal, my personal one, how I would enlarge the conversation, how my conversation has been influenced through my background and behavioral blend, and the potential barriers and how I would deal with them, potential barriers to not achieving my overarching goal, and how I'm going to deal with them, noise pollutions, the internal and external, and lastly, my plan of action. Moving on to slide 3, I went ahead and made the definition what I think overarching goal is, and what my overarching goal. And I think the definition of it is something that encompasses my life, something that overshadows it, my view of how I should go about life. And the one thing I'm struggling right now is with healthy conversation, and when I engage in conversation with others, how I should be acting. Most of the time I forget to listen effectively. Even though I do love to listen, it is hard for me to listen effectively. So I know that that is a problem, and that is something I need to work on in my overarching goal. Moving on to slide 4, I put a very good quote from Peterson's text in here, something that I felt applied to my life and to my project, and it says, listening involves a more sophisticated mental process than hearing. It demands energy and discipline. Listening is a learned skill. The first step is to realize that effective listening is an active, not a passive process. And that was important, that part right there. This is a difficult concept, but it is true. A skilled listener does not just sit there and allow listening to happen. And that's from Peterson's text. If you move on to slide 5, I put my goal, my different bullet points of how I would enlarge the conversation. The first one was listening effectively, making sure that person knows that I am listening. The second one was responding nonverbally to the other participating, using my hands, using my eyes, making sure I'm nodding, making sure I am engaged in conversation, not interrupting and saying, oh, hey, oh, yeah, oh, like that kind of stuff is kind of distracting, but I think nonverbal cues are very important. Keeping a non-aggressive eye contact is also really important in during conversation, is because it's just letting the person know that you are focused on them, which is my next point, is staying focused on the participant, which means just that that person has your undivided attention. Being empathetic has to do with sincerity, making sure that I am listening to that person's problem and that they know that I'm listening to it, and that at the same time that I feel what they feel, that what they're trying to convey to me is something that comes to my heart, that it is sincere and genuine. Being mindful of that participant's feelings in response to their conversation is just what I say back to them, making sure I remember, hey, this is how they feel. Maybe it's not the best thing to say this, and saying it in the right context. And the last one was being clear and concise and making sure I understand what the participant is trying to relay to me, which means asking questions, staying focused, using my nonverbal cues. We move on to slide 6. I put my behavioral blend, which is CIS, is Competent Influence Specialist, and it meant that I can easily discern and evaluate people. I have a gift for that, and I like to do that, where I can sit down and being able to understand who that person is and their personality type. The next one was enjoying listening to stories and issues of other people's. Other people. I do like to listen to other people. I love listening to stories and hearing what people have to say, but it's the listening effectively part that sometimes gets me. The next one was finding enjoyment in stabilizing rough situations. I'm the type of person that if you give me a problem, I like to fix it right off the bat, no questions asked. That's one of my strong points, and it's part of my behavioral blend. Sensitive to critique. I don't like to hear what I do wrong, but it is something that is part of my behavioral blend as well, and it's just something that I need to work on. And the very last one was I have a strong sense of determination. I like to get things done. If I set my eyes on something, I like to get it done and make sure that it's done. If you move on to slide 7, I put my background. I'm the third of 10 children. I'm the eldest girl child. My parents have always been busy people, whether it's having a lot of kids to working all the time, not growing up with any luxuries. My parents are started their family very young, and that's part of who I am today, is because they did. It presented some positive and negatives from me. Also, the cultures between me and my parents is they're Jamaican and I'm American, and it had been a struggle for me. Moving on to slide 8, I did my behavioral blend, positive and negative. Positive was enjoying listening to people, being determined, liking to stabilize situations, and discerning people. Those were positive things that I decided, you know what, in a conversation, those are things that are needed. The negative part was determination can sometimes make me overzealous, and it makes me want to fix a problem without listening to every detail, without making sure I get everything down. Jumping to conclusion when I'm discerning people, saying, oh, I know that type of person. It's not necessarily the right thing to do, but that is a negative of my behavioral blend, being that way, discerning people. Moving on to slide 9, I put the positive and negative impacts of my background. Positive was being the eldest person and learning to care for my siblings made me get responsibility at a young age, and it just showed it shows in who I am today. It helps me to love people and to become responsible, and knowing in a conversation that I am a responsible person and I am empathetic most of the time. Also, the culture difference between my parents and I is that I learned to deal with different cultures, something that was completely different for me, which is Jamaican culture is very different from American culture, and it was a positive because I learned how to deal with other people's cultures today. Negatives were some of those same things as my parents starting their family so young had me as a responsible person at a very young age. So that was one thing that was wrong, is that I learned responsibility way too young in the game. Having a huge family often left me neglected, and so that was also negative. It makes me neglect people today. It's just something that's ingrained in my mind. The culture shock between my parents and I, them wanting to bring their Jamaican culture to the American culture and mixing me in, it became a negative. It comes a negative in my life today. If you move on to slide 10, I put the potential barriers I would have, which is disliking critique, less empathy for people that I don't like, the personality types that I don't like, valuing my opinions over other people's, and being unengaged when I feel I don't need to listen anymore. Those are things that I know can have a barrier over a conversation in helping me to be fully engaged in that conversation. But in slide 11, if you move on to that one, I put ways to deal with those potential barriers, which remembering that feedback is helpful. So that's the critique, making sure I remember, hey, you know what people have to say is good. Looking to God for strength when I don't necessarily like a person. People having opinions that are worthwhile can make more sense than mine, so making sure I'm listening to people whether I agree or not. Being sincere even if I don't agree with the conversation or how it's going, and making sure the participant knows that they have my undivided attention. If you move on to slide 12, I went ahead and put noise pollutions, internal and external, and I put a definition of what I thought noise pollution was from an article by Megan Short. If you move on to slide 13, I put the solutions to noise pollution. Internal would be training myself, prayer, reading effective literature, optimism. Those are all things that I can help to develop myself to help those internal noise pollutions go away. And external noise pollutions, I put surrounding myself with positivity in people, doing unto people what I would like them to do unto them, do unto me, showing them that this is how I want to be treated. If you move on to slide 14, which is my plan of action, I just listed, which is my very last slide, and I just listed the type of things that I would need to help in effective conversation. The top 8 things I put down was confidence, kindness, empathy, sincerity, love, respect, demeanor, and nonverbal cues, which is all something I went over in my PowerPoint. But these are things that I just think that would help a conversation go the most positive route, the most productive route. And that would conclude my my project. Thanks for listening.